Hi everyone and welcome to another video. Today I am going to be sharing the books that I have read in the month of April. I've read 7, which is a fine number for me, but there were a lot of chunkier books in there apparently, so my page count is doing pretty well. Although I have to admit that one of the chunkers that I did finish is one that I had been reading for 2 months, so I'm not entirely sure about the whole page count thing really being absolutely correct, but hey, we're still doing it. So out of those 7, I have read 2 audiobooks, 2 chunkers, which are the Lord of the Rings 1 and 2, so the Fellowship of the Ring and the Two Towers. I already have a vlog up for the first book, and the vlog for the second book should come up sometime in the next weeks when I look at my planning and decide that it is a good moment, because I have other books I also still want to share more of my thoughts about. I've been really liking the rereading experience of these 2. There are a lot of things in the books that I find at fault or stuff that now would, I think, be done differently, but I've been rushing through the books. I'm enjoying rereading them. They're very easy to pick up even though they're quite longer, so I'm good, and I think both of them are around the 20 hours mark, so that still means that I've got about 40 hours of audiobook under my belt. Although I don't really know if those 40 hours would take into account that I read them at 1.5 speed, so maybe it's less. It would make more sense if it's less. So that's the Lord of the Rings. There's another book that I finished rereading, that's the chunker that I talked about earlier, and that is Black Leopard, Red Wolf by Marlon James, which I reread because the second book in the Dark Star trilogy came out, which is Moonwitch Spider King. This is a very complicated book with a lot of intricacies and darkness. It's very dark fantasy rooted in the African myth and folklore. I'll do a separate video where I talk about this one a little bit longer and what it was rereading this one, but for now let me just say that in this book we follow a character called Tracker who has a nose, who can track people with their nose, and he's hired to find this very young child, still a baby, who was kidnapped 3 years earlier. And he does this with a bigger group of characters, one of which is, okay, there is a cat in my garden and it is making my bunnies scared. So let me just check that. I just saved my bunnies. No, nothing was really happening, but the cat was making them scared. Anyway, I was talking about Black Leopard, Red Wolf that I am holding upside down. So a character that is hired to find a baby with another group of characters, one of which is a witch called Sogolon, who is going to be the narrator of the second book. And in this one, so we follow that whole story and all the intricacies that come on with it, and these stories and stories and stories and stories and stories, and narrated by different characters who are all unreliable, and that is where the second book is going to be interesting, because it tells the same story but from the point of view of another character. And that's also why I wanted to reread this, is to discover a little bit more, have this book that I still don't really understand in my head, so that I can see what is going to be different in the second book. Otherwise I'm just going to be reading something and have no idea what it was in the first one. I love seeing my growth as a reader. By reading this, there were a lot of more things that I picked up on. There's still a lot of room for improvement still on my part, although Marlon James has purposely made this in a very complicated way so that as a reader you're completely lost. And that is spot on. The world, all the characters, all the creatures, very interesting. So really appreciated rereading this. I'm looking forward to the next one. I hope I can pick it up in not too long, but you know how it is. You have this book that you are going to pick up next, unless this other one comes on your track that you are going to pick up next before, and then this other one, and this other one, and now I have a lot of books to read. Then another one that I have a separate review up for already is The First Woman by Nansubuga Makumbi. Really like this one as well. This is about a young girl in Uganda, and there are a couple of things that she wants in life. One of them mainly is to discover why her mother has abandoned her, and as she grows up she has all of these women around her. Her grandmother, who's raising her with her grandfather, 2 aunts, there's the village witch who helps her also with learning more about her mother, She goes to boarding school. She has a little bit complicated relationship with her father. So we've got the wife of her father also in the mix. We see her friends and the mothers of friends, and that is how we learn about what it's like to be a woman and the different ways in which women can be oppressed or can fight against oppression. There are very individual ways in this Ugandan setting. I like this one. It might be a little bit on the nose for a lot of people because there are a lot of things that are just explained by one character saying something to another, and it's not always super subtle, but that works for me. This was a level that I really appreciated, and there are probably still subtleties that I didn't pick up on. That don't even hesitate about that one. But I loved seeing these different women and how something happens to one generation, so something similar happens to another generation, and then something similar yet again happens to the third generation, and the different ways in which they are dealing with this and the evolution that you see in that. Again, set in this Ugandan setting where a man can have multiple wives, and that's a little bit of the sometimes a central point in this novel. Really like this. It's a little bit bigger, but I didn't feel... I liked discovering about these characters, so was happy with this one. I also read, I think the smallest book that I read this month is Frere, or At Night All Blood is Black by David Diop. Again, one that I have a separate video about. All of those separate videos will be linked up here. So Frere won the International Booker last year, and it is about a Senegalese soldier that is in the trenches in the First World War. And in the first pages he loses his more than brother, his best friend, and he has a lot of guilt about that, and that jumpstarts him doing some awful war crimes, is what we could say, some awful things. And in the beginning of the book we stay in this short period of 7 days when his friend is killed and what he starts doing, and it kind of goes back and forth. I liked the writing. I found it lyrical, and I liked the rhythm it had, and the second half it goes more towards what his past is and what his recuperation period after being in the trenches is like, and that is where it missed the boat for me. But what I appreciate is that the book, different people really appreciate it in different ways. I have a friend who felt the same way as me about the book, with the split and finding one half very appealing and not really understanding the other, but for him it was the other way around. So I like that this is a book that you can feel very differently about, that is thought-provoking. So yeah, liked it, and I really appreciate the idea that the French youth also is reading this. Let me see, those are the books that I have kind of separate reviews about, or that are either already online or that will come. And then there are two that I wanted to talk about a little bit more now, because I'm not going to be discussing them more. One is one that I got from the library that I saw lying around and thought, hey, I still wanted to read you, and I think this is going to be a weekend thing, so let's just pick it up. So that is Frankissstein by Jeanette Winterson. This is kind of a retelling of Frankissstein that I luckily read, I think 1, maybe 2 years ago with my book club, maybe even 3 years ago, because time flies. We mainly follow two timelines. One about Mary Shelley, the writer of Frankissstein, and it starts when she is starting to write Frankenstein. She's in this house with her husband and three other people, and they have this talk about what are monsters, and that starts her writing Frankissstein, and then we follow her life as she loses children, as she loses her husband, as she thinks about what this monster is. And then the second timeline is one that is set in current time, and we meet a transgender. He's in this kind of retelling of Frankenstein. We've got similar characters to both the Frankenstein novel as Frankenstein being written. So Rye is kind of a mirror of Mary Shelley. They're both called Sherry, and he's in love with a man that is kind of a crazy doctor and is trying to find ways to make people be alive again once they're dead. And so this whole book, there's also other characters that reference other things, but this whole book is about, like, what is a monster, what is life, do we want life after death, what would that look like, what are the different things. If you could choose your body and choose that your body will be able to live hundreds of years, what would that look like? There's these interesting parallels also, because Rai chooses to do physical surgery to their body because of being transgender, so there's a little bit parallels done with that. I like this. It wasn't really anything special, I think, because I was reading it in a weekend as a, yes, I'm just going to spend a lot of time reading and reading fast. A lot of the themes that it jumps into, or a lot of the philosophical ideas that it kind of prompts, also about AI and about robots, and about the cyclicity, the things coming back in life over generations. I just saw that they were there, but I didn't find them interesting enough topics to really start. They didn't spark a thought in my head. I think this would be a nice book to buddy read with someone, or as a book club to have discussions more about. I liked the writing. It was lyrical, especially the parts with Mary Shelley herself. I liked the writing. Yeah, it was a fine read, but for me personally, not being super interested in these themes, nothing very special, but I would recommend it still. It's a good book. Another one, this was a book club read, that's going to be, I think, the last one that I'm talking about in this video, is The Bass Rock by Evie Wyld. There are multiple covers obviously going around this one, and from this one, and the one that I usually saw is the one that I'm going to put up here with the purple fruit. So I didn't really recognize this book as being that book somehow, but I knew that I was interested in the other one, so my brain does weird things. Anyway, this one, we follow 3 timelines. One in the 1700s, where we, through a young man, hear about a girl called Sarah who's being accused of witchcraft. One in the, I think it's after the First World War? No, Second World War. We follow Ruth, who has married a man. She's the second wife of a man who already has children. She is mourning her brother who has died in the Second World War, and she's kind of there. They move to Scotland, and she starts her life there, trying to bond with the children of her husband, but also discovering that her husband is in the business of having a child with another woman, and she discovers that there's some weird thing going on with the community that she moves to, and some weird habits that some of the men have. And then we've got this third storyline that is 6 decades later, so that would be nowadays, and we meet Vivian. Her father has passed away, and she has to take care of the house in Scotland. It's the same house. The father is the son of the husband of the woman. And she's not doing very well emotionally. She's had a lot of issues, and this is, you follow her in that period of trying to take care of the house and stuff that she learns about the past, about her sister, about other things. So while those are the storylines, that isn't really what the book is about. The book is, I would say, mainly about violence perpetrated by men, mostly towards women, but also towards children. It's done both in very subtle ways and both in very, very in-your-face ways. There's sections where we follow these 3 storylines, and at the end we also always get a section that is about some violence towards women. So it's not an easy read, because also of this sometimes being very in-your-face violence and sometimes being very subtle, that you just realize you just get this gut punch. I appreciated this a lot, especially upon reflecting and talking about it with my book club. There's a lot of things that comes in the 3 storylines that kind of interweaves them. I feel that in every video there's at least one word that I struggle finding. This one, it's interweaving. Yeah, I like the writing. I liked how stuff came back. There was a lot of stuff that I didn't pick up on, so I think that this would be a good book to reread, although the stuff that I didn't pick up on, the subtle stuff that is the in-between of the storylines, like this box that comes into the 3 storylines. I wonder if you read the book a second time in 2 years, you will remember the box from one storyline and then recognize it in another. I appreciated also the commentary on the macho world and the toxic masculinity and how that it can be very different in different men. But I missed a little bit of men that are not necessarily that way. The characters that don't do terrible things, you don't know whether it's because you just haven't seen it or they just haven't done it yet. With this one, you kind of start thinking that all men are bad, and that's not something that I believe. So that's one of the things I struggled with this one. But still, I would recommend it, even though it's not. If you can handle those difficult topics, that is. For a book that is still about difficult topics, I did find it pretty. It was easy to read. I mean, the writing is in such a way that you just go through it. There was one point, maybe the reason I'm thinking now, why is it that there are these difficult topics and that I still found it very readable, because I know that that was not the case for everyone, at least in my book club, but maybe it's because I've been desensitized, great, there's a second word, crap. I have been desensitized, yeah, that's what we're going to go with, it's not the word, some of the violence, so that's maybe why we did have these sections where we'd read about stuff and I would just read it as words and as yet another violence, and it wouldn't, the tickling stuff and the violence that is not necessarily toward women, I thought that was more, I remember that more than the more subtle stuff that when you think about it, you're like, what the fuck? If that makes sense. So that's The Vast Rock. Those are the 7 books, so you are still going to be seeing another video about at least Black Leopard, Red Wolf, and the books that I've currently still been reading is La Fortune des Rougon by Émile Zola. This is the first book in the Rougon-Macquart trilogy, it's a French classic, and I'm also still reading Dead Aid. Let me check the author on that one. The author of Dead is Dambisa Moyo, and I'm also reading The Return of the King. So that's my reading now. Other books that I hope to read are Moonwitch, Spider King. I have to get to grade B's. My book club's book for May is Florida. Jennifer Groff is her name. Those are the plans. Yeah. Tell me what you think of the books, and I'll see you in another video. Hope you're doing well. Bye.
Ba-chum, ba-chum, chum.